A video that first went viral a few years ago has been making the rounds again this month as an example of the kind of nonsense one frequently finds in Novus Ordo parishes. Created back in April 2020, the video came from that embarrassing stage of the pandemic when people were recording themselves dancing. Now, in case you're only listening to the audio here, the video depicts a priest and his servers. Looks like it's in the Philippines, but that's just a guess. But it's a priest and his servers in the sanctuary doing a shoddily choreographed dance to the pop song Savage Love by Jason Derulo. Now, there's no evidence this was done during the Mass. Doing this dance to this song was apparently part of a TikTok trend, and it seems this was thankfully not liturgical. Even so, the priest and his servers are in full vestments, performing the dance in a consecrated place in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, with their backs to it, I might add. At best, this represents an unsuitable use of a Catholic sanctuary, and at worst, it's an act of sacrilege to carry out such inane buffoonery in the presence of the sacrament. Commentary on this video was predictable, with Catholics demonstrating rightful indignation and many observing that this is the type of nonsense you tend to find in Novus Ordo parishes. This is all, I think, a healthy response to this type of thing. There was, however, a few special individuals who tried to absolve the Novus Ordo of any role in this. "You can't lay this at the feet of the Novus Ordo," they said. "Rather, it's the lack of discipline in the clergy that makes this sort of thing possible. The NO itself is fully capable of being celebrated with reverence when the priest wishes. It's not the rite, but the poor discipline and formation of priests that is to blame. The problem isn't the Novus Ordo, it's that priests won't say the Novus Ordo the way the rubrics demand." Now, I used to say this same thing. I said it until I was blue in the face. That's why I know what a truly ridiculous argument it is. It's the liturgical equivalent of real communism has never been tried, which we could reformulate as the real Novus Ordo is not being tried, where all the problems in the Novus Ordo world are due merely to accidents of execution and entirely unrelated to the liturgy itself. Now, you'd have to be daft not to notice the concurrence of liturgical abuse and the Reformed Rite. They go together like peanut butter and jelly. Now, of course, correlation does not equal causation, but sometimes it does. And even when it doesn't, the correlation does at least point to some kind of relational dynamic that we should want to understand. Why is the abuse of holy things and places so endemic in the Novus Ordo when the NO itself doesn't call for such things? Well, this is simply because the abuses in the Novus Ordo flow from the same spirit of innovation which brought the new Mass into existence to begin with. People who make the above argument often act like the Novus Ordo is some kind of baseline standard and the abuses are the novelty. But they forget that the Novus Ordo itself is an unprecedented novelty in the history of the Church. And they ignore the interrelatedness of the liturgy and the people who celebrate it, the profound link between the lex orandi and the lex credendi. The liturgy is not merely passive. It's not just Play-Doh waiting for the celebrant to stamp his character upon it, for it also stamps its character upon him. A liturgy which scrambles tradition breeds priests that scramble the liturgy. So while it is true that a priest brings his formation to the liturgy he celebrates, even more so does the liturgy he celebrates form the priest. Now let's use an analogy from the military. Unruly soldiers have plagued armies since the dawn of time. What causes soldiers to lose discipline and become unruly? We could always, of course, say that there are bound to be a few bad apples in any military unit, unscrupulous men who care nothing for order and are just waiting to exploit every opportunity for reckless behavior. Every army has such men and always has. And addressing such problems is a matter of individualized discipline on a case-by-case basis. But anyone who has studied military history knows that there is what we might call a structural aspect to this problem as well. Unruly troops will always cause bad behavior, but even good troops can become unruly under certain conditions, like an unpopular commander, the ravages of hunger, political discontent, and poor morale, which can all lead to outbursts of disorder amongst otherwise orderly troops. Perhaps the most common cause of troop disorder historically is lax discipline in the ranks, arising from a commander's aversion to enforcing the strict regimens suitable to military life. In a general atmosphere of laxity, soldiers become accustomed to laziness in their routines, and a certain freewheeling attitude prevails in their approach to their duties. The deterioration of discipline erodes the spirit decor of the unit. Men think less about what the cohesion of the group requires and more about what they can get away with. The breakdown in order encourages men's worst tendencies to bubble to the surface in the knowledge that punishment is highly unlikely. Under such conditions, even the best of soldiers can degenerate into an unruly and bloodthirsty mob. Look, if you don't believe me, just read Tacitus, okay? Now, let's bring this back to the Novus Ordo. The prevalence of abuses in the Novus Ordo world is not unrelated to the Novus Ordo itself. The rubrics of the NO certainly do not call for these abuses, just like no military manual calls for unruly behavior. But the elasticity baked into the Novus Ordo makes such abuses inevitable. The dizzying plethora of choices, the encouragement of extemporaneity of prayer, the permissiveness surrounding lay involvement, the broad allowances for musical variety, and just the endless optionality that keeps the Novus Ordo's structure solid as jello. And this all exists within a general atmosphere of tinkeritis and perpetual evolution where creativity is encouraged and few are ever called to account for their excesses. Not only do our leaders fail to curb such awful liturgies, they themselves model them from the highest echelons of the ecclesiastical hierarchy. Now, under such conditions, it's no surprise that the Novus Ordo world looks like it does. The priesthood has the character of a once disciplined military unit whose stabilizing regimen, that is, the liturgy, has broken down. And without the steadying hand of an ordered, transcendent liturgy reflecting the church's heritage, priestly formation inevitably suffers in turn. Of course, a few bad apples could sabotage the TLM as well. There were abuses in the traditional rite in the past, and it's certainly possible that a priest disposed to do so could suddenly break out in liturgical dancing in the midst of a traditional Latin Mass. But the difference is that the space for these things isn't baked into the structure of the TLM the way it is in the Novus Ordo. In other words, there is no room for structural abuse in the traditional rite. The only abuse you can find in the traditional rite is due to bad actors. But the structural elasticity of the Novus Ordo incentivizes the proliferation of novelty. One tinkering with the TLM has to go against the current to do so, while someone tinkering with the Novus Ordo is going with the current. The text of the Novus Ordo might not call for such tinkering, but the structure and culture of the NO world create the conditions conducive for it. Conditions which become much more acute when we consider that there is an entire cast of bad actors in authority who revel in the liturgical deconstructionism of the NO and think that it hasn't gone far enough. And these bad actors are propped up in power due to the same spirit of novelty which gave us the Novus Ordo to begin with. So no, I don't buy that the solution is just finding the elusive real Novus Ordo. While liturgical texts will always be important, the liturgy itself is more than just texts. It is something that is done. The real Novus Ordo, then, is the one you actually get.
Yeah.